So I'm here on our seawall, which was put in 1901 by the Corps of Engineers, engineer actually named Samuel Young. And this seawall has helped protect the island since that time. Now, the majority of erosion that goes on out here in terms of land loss on the Preservation Virginia property has actually not been necessarily sea level rise to this point or up to this point, or paddle boats or sea dews or something like that. It's actually been windborne erosion. So today is a beautiful day and it's actually pretty calm after the recent hurricane we had. But when we look down the seawall, you can see that it extends around the edge of the property on the riverside, and that was put in to abate the actual windborne erosion. So 90% of the time when you visit Jamestown, you're able to see that the wind blows out of the west, and there's a long fetch, what they call a fetch, which is the distance out there where there's no trees or land to stop the wind from blowing. So that's a pretty excessive, it's about 7 miles. And the wind blows across the river and is actually lapping up on, as if the island is a ship going into the wind. And so over the centuries, the island has eroded quite a bit, where you see the ferryway out there, and has eventually come to this point, and in 1901 was stopped. That's really the reason that we exist as an organization here on the island, because in 1893, Preservation Virginia came out here, and there was a complaint that 200 paces west of the tower, human remains were eroding into the water. And so in a somewhat, I guess we say, modern sense for us as an organization, that's been issues with erosion and storm damage. And this seawall has been one of the best things, obviously, to happen to the property. Now, it's not the first. We know historically that there have been many hurricanes and erosion issues out here on the island, and we often see that when we're excavating. So right here behind me, as we start to excavate, the drive of this excavation is actually to look at part of James Fort, but also to look at the end of the seawall. We've got some damage over there in the corner where the seawall is cracked and subsided, and we want to go back and look at that. But in the process, we're going to get a great view and understanding, an additional understanding of the eastern bulwark or gun emplacement of James Fort. And so years ago, when I first started working here in 2001, we were excavating just over here behind me in what was called the John White Warehouse. And as we dug down, we encountered a sand layer that we believe was attributed to a hurricane that nearly wiped out the colony in the 1660s. There's good historical documentation for that, and it was on top of the remains of the structure, a sandy wash flood layer that was on top of there, that was after the building was constructed in the 40s. So this isn't hurricanes and storm erosion and damage aren't a new thing to the project. There's something that has always been an issue here. It was certainly likely a surprise for the English because there are not a lot of hurricanes in England. Now, where I'm standing, since I've worked with the project and its inception in '94 up until when I was a full-time employee in 2001, we've regularly had water up to about my waist level, which is quite impressive across the entire island. And that is, as you may imagine, a function of climate change and sea level rise. Now, over the years, we've been looking at and addressing that in terms of this property, and it's something that is not just a Jamestown Island concern, but a Tidewater, Virginia concern. And much of what we're looking at is modern erosion, not just here, but across the island with our partners of the Park Service, and how we can look to preserve the sites that aren't just James Fort, but all the many iterations of sites over time as the colony expanded. And that's absolutely critical because the over 400 years of history for the English enslaved and first Africans and first peoples that lived on the island after the inception of the colony in 1607, but also 12,000 plus years of occupation at different portions of the island that aren't necessarily right here. So it's something that's ongoing and something that we'll probably continue to deal with the rest of our careers, and several generations of archaeologists that have to deal with it as time goes on.